Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to this video for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. Today we're stitching our second Sawtooth star block, and we're going to fill it with spirals and wiggles. So let's check it out and see what this design is going to look like on this traditional quilt block. So here we go. I've knocked out all of my spirals except for these two, so that way you can see how I flow through these areas. What I've done is just basically stitched the ditch along this edge, and I've gotten to the edge where it's butting up against the spiral. And now I'm going to flow into that outer circle first. And there are a lot of seam allowances in this area that can be kind of tricky to quilt over, and especially tricky to quilt a nice circular shape and a nice spiral within it. So just watch out for those seam allowances that kind of are always there, kind of lurking in the shadows, ready to mess you up. Okay, so that's my circle stitched. And now I'm going to flow into the spiral. And I have to say I regret my placement of the spiral in the design, because it comes right over and the tip is right overlapping a seam allowance. But I think if you take it slow and easy, flow through that area and have a good grip on the block, it's going to work out just fine. And then of course after you've stitched 4 of these, it starts to work out pretty easily. And now I'm travel stitching back out, all the way back out to the tip of that triangle. And so now I've got stitching basically around that star. I've been knocked out all of my spirals all in one go, and that puts me in a really good position to fill in my star. Okay, I've got wiggly U shapes, and those are easy enough to stitch freehand, so I'm just going to freehand this in. Just simple wiggly lines up and down. Whenever I'm stitching this, a lot of times a lot of seam allowance there. I'm thinking to myself, wiggle up, wiggle down, wiggle up, wiggle down, something like that. It's kind of silly, but it helps. I wanted those stitched just a little dense, so that's the way I knocked them out. They're a little closer than 1/4 of an inch away from, at least the lines of quilting are 1/4 of an inch apart through that. A little bit less. Now I'm going to knock out the ditches in this center square, and the reason being I'm just feeling like maybe those wiggly shapes would be a little easier to knock out if this was stitched and secured. It's just careful stitching, especially into the corners. There's a lot of bulk in those corners. Careful stitching as you come up to that flying geese point right there. It's easy to lose control simply because the layers of fabric are impacting your presser foot. Just watch out for it. Okay, I'm going to do one more set of wiggles so you can see how that works. And it's kind of nice when you have one that's stitched or marked, you can kind of use that as a base to go off of. I'm going to wiggle up and down and up and down. And it's whenever I stitch, usually that one, I'm kind of estimating I really want a wiggle to go into that corner. Ooh, as close as I can. It's kind of tricky. It's bulky in that corner, and so it doesn't, my presser foot doesn't really want to do that. But they roughly match. They don't need to be identical. That's not important. Okay, I'm going to flow, do some travel stitching and get to this point, and I can show you how to knock out this center spiral. Okay, now if you recognize this center spiral, it's actually the exact same design that we learned in our 4-patch block, block number 1. So if you want a little review and blast from the past, just go back and stitch that spiral again, make another 4-patch, and that would be some good practice to knock it out. I'm just swinging down and around. There's no seam allowances to worry about in this area, so it's pretty simple quilting. Get to the tip of that inside and change direction. If you decided that you wanted to freehand quilt this, you're basically just focusing on stitching right through the middle of the spiral to get back out again. So that's it for stitching spirals and wiggles in our second Sawtooth star block. You know, the spirals, the way they were placed, it can be a little tricky. The seam allowances do cause issues. You know, I've said that a lot in the last 4 blocks or so. Seam allowances have become kind of the thing to watch out for. If you're finding that this is a struggle, go back to some of the easier blocks that we've learned four patch, rail fence. Those blocks are easier because there's less piecing involved. There's less less layers to worry about. Or you can also pick up the spoonflower panel, which is basically just printed fabric, no seam allowances at all, and it can make the quilting process easier. If you're looking to just build skill with quilting and you're not really interested in dealing with the challenges that can come or even put the time into piecing, then that's totally understandable and that might be a better fit for you. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Building Blocks Quilt-Along. Pick up your copy of the Building Blocks quilt pattern and join us as we learn how to piece and free motion quilt through 42 beautiful blocks. You can pick up your pattern at leahday.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.